What if I told you that every single battle you're fighting in your life right now, whether it's climbing the corporate ladder, building a business, getting that promotion, or even dealing with difficult people, could be won without you ever having to fight? What if there was a way to become so strategically superior that your opponents would surrender before the battle even begins? 2,500 years ago, a Chinese general figured out the ultimate cheat code for life. His name was Sun Tzu, and he wrote 13 chapters that would become the most influential strategy book in human history. But here's the thing that blows my mind. Most people think The Art of War is about ancient battles and military tactics. They couldn't be more wrong. This book is actually the ultimate guide to winning in business, relationships, negotiations, and life itself. And the core principle that changed everything for me personally? The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Think about that for a second. Winning without fighting. Getting what you want without conflict. Achieving your goals while making everyone else think it was their idea. I'm about to take you on a journey that will completely transform how you approach every challenge in your life. We're going to decode the 13 most powerful strategic principles ever written, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why billionaire CEOs, world leaders, and the most successful people on the planet all study this ancient text. But before we dive in, I need you to do something right now. If you're ready to stop fighting losing battles and start thinking like a strategic mastermind, type warrior in the comments. I want to see how many future strategic thinkers are watching this video. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because what you're about to learn will change everything. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Genius. Let me paint you a picture. It's 500 BCE, and China isn't the unified country you know today. It's a patchwork of warring kingdoms, each one trying to destroy the others. In this chaos of blood and steel, most generals are obsessed with bigger armies, sharper swords, and more brutal tactics. But there's this one guy, Sun Tzu, later known as Sun Tzu, and he's thinking completely differently. While everyone else is focused on how to fight better, he's asking a revolutionary question. What if we could win without fighting at all? Picture this scene. The king of Wu is interviewing potential generals for his army. Sun Tzu walks in and makes an outrageous claim. He says he can turn anyone, even the king's own concubines, into a disciplined fighting force. The king laughs and says, "Prove it." So Sun Tzu takes 180 palace women who have never held a weapon in their lives. He divides them into 2 companies and appoints the king's 2 favorite concubines as commanders. He explains the basic military commands: left, right, forward, halt. Simple stuff, right? But when he gives the first command, the women just giggle. They think it's a game. Sun Tzu repeats his instructions clearly and gives the command again. More giggling. Now here's where it gets intense. Sun Tzu says, "If my instructions aren't clear, that's my fault as a commander. But if my instructions are clear and they're not followed, that's the fault of the officers." He orders the execution of the 2 company commanders, the king's favorite concubines. The king freaks out and begs Sun Tzu to stop, but Sun Tzu refuses. He executes them on the spot and appoints 2 new commanders from the ranks. Then something incredible happens. He gives the next command, and every single woman moves in perfect unison. Left, right, forward, halt, flawless execution. In minutes, he had transformed a group of giggling palace women into a disciplined military unit. The king is horrified but also amazed. And Sun Tzu looks at him and says, "Your army is ready for battle, Your Majesty. They will march through fire and water at your command." This story isn't just about military discipline. It's about the psychology of leadership, the power of consequences, and the difference between being liked and being respected. Sun Tzu understood something that most people still don't get today. Sometimes you have to be willing to make hard decisions that others won't make if you want to achieve results that others can't achieve. If you're starting to see how this applies to modern leadership, type discipline in the comments. Chapter 2. The Supreme Strategy. Now let's talk about the principle that's going to change your entire approach to life. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Most people completely misunderstand this quote. They think it means being passive, avoiding confrontation, or just hoping problems go away. That's not what Sun Tzu meant at all. He meant becoming so strategically superior that resistance becomes pointless. Let me give you a modern example that'll blow your mind. In 2007, A company called Netflix was mailing DVDs to customers, while a giant called Blockbuster dominated the video rental market with 9,000 stores worldwide. Everyone expected a brutal battle. But Netflix CEO Reed Hastings wasn't planning to fight Blockbuster at their own game. Instead, Netflix was quietly building streaming technology. While Blockbuster was focused on optimizing their physical stores and late fees, Netflix was creating a completely different battlefield, one where Blockbuster's biggest strengths became irrelevant overnight. When Netflix launched streaming, they didn't beat Blockbuster in the DVD rental war. They made DVD rentals obsolete. Blockbuster went bankrupt not because they lost a fair fight, but because they suddenly found themselves fighting the wrong war entirely. This is Sun Tzu's principle in action. Netflix subdued their enemy without fighting by changing the rules of the game. They won by making the traditional competition irrelevant. Think about this in your own life. Maybe you're competing for a promotion at work. The obvious strategy is to work harder than everyone else, stay later, take on more projects. But what if there's a smarter way? What if you could position yourself as the solution to a problem your boss doesn't even know they have yet? Or maybe you're an entrepreneur trying to break into a crowded market. Instead of trying to beat established competitors at their own game, what if you could create an entirely new category where you're the only player? The key insight here is that direct confrontation is often the least efficient path to victory. When you're fighting on someone else's terms, you're already at a disadvantage. But when you can set the terms of engagement, you can win before the battle even begins. Let me tell you about a guy named Sarah Blakely. In 2000, she wanted to start a pantyhose company. The obvious approach would have been to compete with established brands on price, quality, or marketing. Instead, she asked a different question. What if women didn't want pantyhose at all? What if they wanted something that gave them the smooth look without the feet? She invented Spanx and created an entirely new product category. She didn't beat the pantyhose companies. She made them irrelevant for her target market. Today, she's a billionaire, and those traditional pantyhose companies are still wondering what hit them. If you're starting to see opportunities in your life where you could change the game instead of just playing it better, type "game change" in the comments. Chapter 3. Know yourself. Know your enemy. Sun Tzu wrote, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle." This might be the most practical advice ever given, and most people completely ignore it. Let me break down why this principle is absolutely crucial in our modern world. First, knowing yourself. This isn't some touchy-feely self-help concept. This is strategic intelligence. You need to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your resources, your limitations, and your patterns. Most people overestimate their strengths and underestimate their weaknesses, which leads to strategic disasters. I learned this lesson the hard way when I started my first business. I thought I was good at everything: sales, marketing, product development, operations. I was convinced I could handle it all myself. 6 months later, I was burned out, my product sucked, and I had no customers. Why? Because I didn't know myself well enough to understand that trying to do everything meant doing nothing well. The successful entrepreneurs I know today have brutal honesty about their capabilities. They know exactly what they're world-class at, what they're adequate at, and what they should never touch. They build teams around their weaknesses and focus their personal energy on their unique strengths. But knowing yourself is only half the equation. You also need to understand your competition, your market, your customers, and the environment you're operating in. This means research, analysis, and sometimes just paying attention to things other people ignore. Let me tell you about how Uber understood both themselves and their enemy better than anyone expected. When Uber started, everyone thought they were just another taxi company. The taxi industry focused on regulation, medallions, and protecting their existing business model. But Uber understood something crucial. They weren't really competing with taxis. They were competing with the inconvenience of urban transportation. Uber knew their own strengths: technology, venture capital funding, and the ability to move fast. They also understood their market better than the taxi companies did. People didn't want a taxi. They wanted reliable, convenient transportation that didn't require cash, didn't require calling and waiting, and didn't require wondering if the driver would show up. By the time the taxi industry realized what was happening, Uber had already redefined the entire market. The taxi companies were fighting to protect their piece of the old pie, while Uber was baking an entirely new pie. Here's how you can apply this principle starting today. First, do an honest assessment of yourself. What are you actually good at? Not what you wish you were good at, but what results prove you excel at. What energizes you versus what drains you? What do other people consistently ask for your help with? Second, study your competition or challenges like your success depends on it, because it does. If you're looking for a job, don't just submit applications. Research the companies, understand their challenges, know their competitors, figure out what keeps their executives up at night. Then position yourself as the solution to their specific problems. If you're building a business, don't just focus on your product. Understand your customer's entire journey. What are they doing before they encounter your solution? What happens after they buy from you? What alternatives are they considering? What would make your solution so valuable that price becomes irrelevant? The companies and individuals who win consistently are the ones who have better information and use it more effectively. They see opportunities others miss because they're paying attention to signals others ignore. If you're committed to becoming a student of both yourself and your challenges, type intelligence in the comments. Chapter 4. The Art of Positioning. Sun Tzu said, "All warfare is based on deception." Now, before you think I'm telling you to lie and cheat your way to success, let me explain what he really meant. This isn't about being dishonest. It's about strategic positioning and managing perceptions. In business and life, positioning is everything. It's about being in the right place at the right time with the right capabilities. It's about shaping how others see you, your company, or your ideas. And sometimes, it's about misdirecting attention away from your real objectives until you're ready to reveal them. Let me tell you a story about Steve Jobs that perfectly illustrates this principle. In the early 2000s, Apple was known as a computer company struggling to compete with Microsoft and Dell. But Jobs was quietly working on something that would completely reposition Apple in the market. While everyone expected Apple to announce faster computers or better software, Jobs walked onto a stage in 2001 and pulled out a small white device. "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone," he said. Except he wasn't talking about a phone at all. He was introducing the iPod. But here's the genius part. The iPod wasn't just a music player. It was a Trojan horse that repositioned Apple from a niche computer company into a lifestyle brand. Once people started carrying Apple products in their pockets, buying Apple computers didn't seem so crazy anymore. Then, 6 years later, Jobs used the same strategy again. While competitors were focused on making better phones or better music players, Apple introduced the iPhone, a device that made both categories obsolete. This is strategic positioning at its finest. Apple didn't announce their master plan up front. They revealed it piece by piece, positioning each move as something else until their true strategy became unstoppable. You can use this same principle in your career. Maybe you want to transition from marketing to product management. The obvious approach is to apply for product management jobs and hope someone takes a chance on you. But what if you could position yourself differently? Start by volunteering for projects that bridge marketing and product. Become the person who understands both customer needs and technical constraints. Develop expertise in user research or data analysis, skills that both roles value. Before long, you're not asking for a career change. You're the obvious choice when a product role opens up. Or maybe you're building a business in a crowded market. Instead of positioning yourself as another solution, what if you could position yourself as the solution for a specific underserved segment? Instead of being a generic consultant, become the go-to expert for companies facing a specific challenge. The key to effective positioning is understanding what your audience values and aligning your presentation with those values. This doesn't mean lying about your capabilities. It means highlighting the aspects of your background that are most relevant to their needs. Let me give you a personal example. When I started creating content, I could have positioned myself as another business YouTuber. Instead, I focused on something more specific, translating complex business strategies into practical actions. This positioning attracted people who were tired of theoretical advice and wanted concrete steps they could implement immediately. Strategic positioning also means timing your communications for maximum impact. You don't reveal everything at once. You build narrative tension. You create curiosity. You make people want to know what comes next. Apple is famous for this. They don't just announce products. They create events. They build anticipation. They control the narrative. By the time they reveal their actual product, people are already emotionally invested in wanting it. If you're seeing opportunities to position yourself more strategically in your career or business, type position in the comments. Chapter 5. The Power of Timing. Sun Tzu understood that timing could make the difference between victory and defeat. He wrote about striking when the enemy is unprepared and avoiding battle when conditions are unfavorable. In our modern context, this principle is absolutely crucial for anyone who wants to achieve extraordinary results. Let me tell you about a decision that made someone I know over $10 million, and it all came down to timing. In 2008, when the financial crisis hit, most people were panicking. The stock market was crashing, real estate was collapsing, and everyone was focused on protecting what they had left. But my friend saw something different. He understood that crises create opportunities for those who are prepared and willing to act. While everyone else was selling, he was buying. He picked up rental properties at 40% below their previous values. He hired talented people who had been laid off from big companies. He started a business serving customers whose previous suppliers had gone out of business. 10 years later, those real estate investments had tripled in value. The team he built during the crisis had become the core of a highly successful company. And the business he started serving displaced customers had grown into a market leader. The same crisis that destroyed wealth for millions of people created massive wealth for him. The difference wasn't luck, it was strategic timing. But timing isn't just about big economic cycles. It's about understanding the rhythms and patterns in your industry, your company, and your personal life. It's about recognizing when conditions are favorable for the moves you want to make. In your career, timing might mean asking for a promotion right after you've delivered a major success, not when you're struggling with a project. It might mean changing jobs when your industry is growing, not when it's contracting. It might mean starting a side business when your main job is stable, not when it's uncertain. For entrepreneurs, timing might mean launching a product when market conditions create demand for your solution. It might mean raising funding when investors are optimistic about your sector. It might mean expanding when competitors are struggling or distracted. Let me tell you about Airbnb's timing strategy. They launched in 2008, right in the middle of the financial crisis. Most people thought it was terrible timing. Who wants to stay in strangers' homes during a recession? But the founders understood something crucial. The recession created their perfect market conditions. People needed extra income, so they were willing to rent out rooms in their homes. Other people needed cheaper travel options, so they were willing to try alternatives to hotels. The economic pressure created both supply and demand for Airbnb's platform simultaneously. If they had launched during a booming economy, people might not have been motivated to become hosts, and travelers might not have been price-sensitive enough to try the service. The crisis that seemed like bad timing was actually perfect timing for their business model. The key to strategic timing is developing the patience to wait for the right moment and the courage to act decisively when that moment arrives. Most people get this backwards. They act impulsively when they should wait and hesitate when they should act. Here's how you can develop better timing instincts. First, start paying attention to cycles and patterns in your environment. When do people in your industry typically change jobs? When do companies typically make budget decisions? When are your customers most likely to buy? Second, prepare for opportunities before they arrive. Have your resume updated before you need a new job. Build relationships before you need favors. Develop skills before they become essential. This preparation allows you to move quickly when the timing is right. Third, learn to recognize windows of opportunity. These are periods when conditions align to make certain actions more likely to succeed. Maybe it's when a competitor makes a mistake, when new technology creates possibilities, or when market conditions shift in your favor. Fourth, understand that perfect timing is often about being slightly ahead of the curve, not right on time. By the time everyone else recognizes an opportunity, it's often too late to get maximum advantage from it. If you can think of a situation where better timing could have changed your results, type timing in the comments. Chapter 6. The 5 Factors of Success. Sun Tzu identified 5 constant factors that determine the outcome of any strategic situation. These factors are so fundamental that they apply to everything from ancient warfare to modern business and personal success. Let me break them down for you. The first factor is the way, what Sun Tzu called moral purpose or having a mission that people can believe in. In ancient times, this meant having the moral authority to lead troops into battle. Today, it means having a clear vision that's bigger than just personal gain. Think about the most successful leaders you know. They don't just have goals, they have missions that other people want to be part of. Elon Musk doesn't just want to make money from Tesla. He wants to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. Steve Jobs didn't just want to sell computers. He wanted to put powerful technology in the hands of individuals. This isn't just inspirational fluff, it's strategic advantage. When people believe in your mission, they'll work harder, stay longer, and make sacrifices they wouldn't make for just a paycheck. Customers will pay premium prices for products that align with their values. Investors will fund businesses that promise to change the world, not just generate returns. In your personal life, this might mean connecting your career to something meaningful. Instead of just climbing the corporate ladder, maybe you're building expertise that will help you solve important problems. Instead of just starting a business, maybe you're creating something that will improve people's lives. The second factor is heaven, the external conditions you can't control but must adapt to. This includes economic cycles, technological changes, cultural trends, and competitive dynamics. You can't control these forces, but you can position yourself to benefit from them. The most successful people are students of their environment. They pay attention to demographic shifts, technological trends, regulatory changes, and cultural movements. They position themselves to ride favorable waves rather than fighting against them. For example, someone who understood the aging population trend might have positioned themselves in healthcare, elder care, or financial services for retirees. Someone who saw the remote work trend early might have built location-independent skills or started a business serving distributed teams. The third factor is Earth, your terrain and resources. This is about understanding and maximizing the assets available to you. In business, this might be your physical location, your technology infrastructure, your brand, or your network. The key insight here is that the same resources can be leveraged very differently depending on your strategy. A small budget can be a disadvantage if you're trying to outspend competitors, but it can be an advantage if it forces you to be more creative and efficient. Location can be a disadvantage if you're in an expensive city trying to compete on cost, but an advantage if you're in that same city trying to access talent and customers. Your youth can be a disadvantage when trying to establish credibility, but an advantage when trying to connect with younger markets. The fourth factor is the commander, your leadership capabilities. This isn't just about formal leadership positions. It's about your ability to make good decisions, influence others, and execute effectively. Sun Tzu identified 5 essential leadership qualities: intelligence, strategic thinking, trustworthiness, reliability, courage, willingness to make hard decisions, benevolence, caring about others, and strictness, maintaining standards. The most successful people excel at multiple areas but have exceptional strength in at least one. They also understand their leadership style and adapt it to different situations. The fifth factor is methods and discipline, your systems and execution capability. This is about turning strategy into results through consistent, disciplined action. The best strategies in the world are worthless without excellent execution. This means having clear processes, measuring what matters, maintaining quality standards, and continuously improving your methods. Here's what's crucial to understand. All 5 factors must work together. Weakness in any one area can undermine your entire strategic position. You might have a great mission and perfect timing, but if you can't execute consistently, you'll fail. You might have excellent systems and strong leadership, but if you're fighting against major environmental trends, you'll struggle. The most successful people and organizations audit themselves regularly against all 5 factors. They identify their weakest areas and work systematically to strengthen them. They also recognize when external conditions change and adapt their strategies accordingly. If you're ready to analyze which of these 5 factors might be your biggest opportunity for improvement, type factors in the comments. Chapter 7. The Psychology of Influence. Sun Tzu understood that battles are won in the mind before they're fought on any battlefield. His insights into human psychology remain incredibly powerful for anyone seeking to influence outcomes in their favor. Let me tell you about one of the most brilliant psychological strategies I've ever witnessed. A friend of mine was trying to sell his company to a much larger corporation. The obvious approach would have been to create a presentation showing his company's value and trying to convince the buyer to pay a fair price. Instead, he used pure Sun Tzu psychology. He invited the CEO of the larger company to visit his office, but he scheduled the meeting for a day when his team was working on their most impressive project. He didn't present or pitch anything. He just let the CEO observe his team in action. During the visit, the CEO watched young engineers solving complex problems with tools and techniques his own team hadn't even heard of. He saw a level of innovation and agility that his larger, bureaucratic organization couldn't match. By the end of the day, the CEO wasn't thinking about whether to buy the company, he was worried about competing against it. The negotiation that followed was completely different. Instead of my friend trying to convince the CEO to buy, the CEO was trying to convince my friend to sell. The psychological positioning had shifted entirely. This illustrates several key psychological principles that Sun Tzu understood. First, people make decisions emotionally and then justify them logically. The CEO didn't want to buy the company because of spreadsheets and financial projections. He wanted to buy it because he felt threatened by its capabilities and excited by its potential. Second, demonstration is more powerful than explanation. Instead of telling the CEO how innovative his team was, my friend showed him. The CEO could see and feel the difference rather than just hearing about it. Third, scarcity and competition create value. By making the CEO feel like he might lose the opportunity to acquire this capability, my friend increased the perceived value of the deal. But this isn't about manipulation, it's about effective communication. The company really was innovative. The team really was exceptional. My friend just presented this reality in the most compelling way possible. You can apply these same psychological principles ethically in your own life. When you're interviewing for a job, don't just tell them about your accomplishments, show them examples of your work. Create a portfolio that demonstrates your capabilities rather than just listing them on a resume. When you're trying to influence a decision at work, don't just present data. Tell stories that help people feel the impact of different choices. Help them visualize the consequences of action and inaction. When you're building relationships, focus on adding value rather than asking for favors. People are more likely to help those who have already helped them. Sun Tzu also understood the power of reputation. Your reputation precedes you into every interaction and shapes how people interpret your words and actions. Someone known for reliability and competence will get the benefit of the doubt in ambiguous situations. Someone known for making promises they can't keep will be questioned even when they're telling the truth. Building a strong reputation requires consistency over time. It means delivering on your commitments, even small ones. It means being honest about your capabilities and limitations. It means treating all people with respect, not just those who can help you immediately. Another crucial psychological insight from Sun Tzu is the difference between being feared and being respected. Fear might create compliance in the short term, but it breeds resentment and eventual rebellion. Respect creates willing cooperation and long-term loyalty. In modern terms, this means leading through influence rather than authority. It means making people want to help you achieve your objectives rather than forcing them to comply. It means creating win-win scenarios where supporting you benefits them as well. The most effective leaders understand what motivates different people and adapt their approach accordingly. Some people are motivated by recognition, others by autonomy, others by the opportunity to learn and grow. The key is understanding individual motivations and aligning your requests with what people already want. If you're seeing new possibilities for how you could apply these psychological principles ethically in your life, type influence in the comments. Chapter 8. Adaptation and Flexibility. One of Sun Tzu's most important teachings is that rigid plans fail. He wrote, "Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe he is facing." This metaphor perfectly captures one of the most crucial skills for success in our rapidly changing world: the ability to adapt quickly to new conditions while maintaining your strategic direction. Let me tell you about a company that mastered this principle so well they turned a near-death experience into global dominance. In 1985, Intel was a memory chip manufacturer getting destroyed by Japanese competitors who could produce better chips at lower costs. They were hemorrhaging money and laying off employees. The obvious strategy would have been to double down on memory chips, improve quality, cut costs, fight harder. Instead, Intel made a radical adaptation. They noticed that their microprocessors, which they had developed as a side project, were becoming increasingly important as personal computers grew in popularity. So they made a decision that seemed crazy at the time. They completely exited the memory business and bet everything on microprocessors. This wasn't just changing tactics, it was changing their entire identity as a company. That adaptation saved Intel and made them one of the most valuable companies in the world. If they had stuck rigidly to their original plan of being a memory company, they would have gone out of business decades ago. This kind of strategic flexibility requires several key capabilities. First, you need to separate your methods from your objectives. Your objective might be to build a successful business, but your method, whether that's selling memory chips or microprocessors, should always be open to change. Second, you need systems for detecting when adaptation is necessary. Intel didn't wait until they were bankrupt to recognize the memory business was doomed. They were constantly monitoring market conditions, customer preferences, and competitive dynamics. Third, you need the courage to make changes before you're forced to. The best time to adapt is when you still have resources and options, not when you're desperate and have no choice. Fourth, you need to build flexibility into your systems from the beginning. This means avoiding long-term commitments that can't be changed, developing skills that transfer across different situations, and maintaining relationships with diverse groups of people. In your personal career, this might mean developing a portfolio of skills rather than specializing so narrowly that you become vulnerable to change. It might mean building a network that includes people from different industries and functions. It might mean creating multiple income streams so you're not dependent on any single employer or client. For entrepreneurs, this might mean building products that can evolve based on customer feedback rather than betting everything on a single fixed vision. It might mean maintaining financial reserves that give you time to adapt when market conditions change. It might mean developing partnerships that can shift as opportunities emerge. But adaptation isn't just about reacting to threats, it's also about capitalizing on opportunities. The most successful people and organizations are constantly experimenting with small tests that could lead to big breakthroughs. Amazon started as an online bookstore but adapted to become the everything store. Then they adapted again to become a cloud computing company. Then they adapted again to become a content creator with Amazon Prime Video. Each adaptation built on their previous capabilities while opening new possibilities. Netflix evolved from DVD by mail to streaming to content creation. Each shift required abandoning previous investments and methods, but each shift also positioned them for the next wave of opportunity. The key insight is that adaptation isn't about changing direction randomly. It's about evolving strategically based on new information and changing conditions. You maintain your core purpose while remaining flexible about methods. Here's how you can develop better adaptive capacity. First, regularly question your assumptions. What seemed true 6 months ago might not be true today. What worked in your previous job might not work in your current situation. Second, experiment continuously with small tests. Try new approaches on a small scale before committing major resources. This allows you to learn quickly and fail cheaply. Third, build learning into your regular processes. Set aside time regularly to reflect on what's working, what's not working, and what's changing in your environment. Fourth, maintain multiple options whenever possible. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Keep developing relationships, skills, and opportunities even when you don't immediately need them. If you're committed to becoming more flexible and responsive in your approach to challenges, type adapt in the comments. Chapter 9. The Power of Alliances. Sun Tzu wrote, "The skillful strategist defeats the enemy without any fighting. He captures their cities without laying siege to them. He overthrows their kingdom without lengthy operations in the field." Often, this is accomplished through superior alliance building. Let me tell you about one of the most brilliant alliance strategies I've ever seen. When Salesforce was trying to compete with Microsoft, Oracle, and other established software giants, they faced an impossible challenge. These companies had massive resources, established customer relationships, and decades of market credibility. Instead of trying to outspend or outmuscle these competitors, Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff built an ecosystem of alliances that made his company incredibly difficult to compete against. He created a platform where thousands of third-party developers could build applications. He partnered with consulting companies who would recommend Salesforce to their clients. He allied with other software companies to create integrated solutions. By the time Microsoft and Oracle realized what was happening, Salesforce wasn't just one company anymore. It was the center of an entire ecosystem. Competing with Salesforce meant competing with thousands of partners and developers simultaneously. This is Sun Tzu's principle in action, winning through strategic relationships rather than direct confrontation. In your personal career, Alliance building might mean developing relationships with people in different departments who can help you understand organizational dynamics. It might mean maintaining connections with former colleagues who can provide references or job opportunities. It might mean building relationships with people in your industry who can share insights and opportunities. The key insight is that your network becomes a multiplier for your individual capabilities. The right introduction, recommendation, or collaboration can achieve more than years of individual effort. But effective alliance building requires understanding what others need and finding ways to provide value before asking for help. The most successful networkers are those who consistently help others achieve their objectives. Let me give you a personal example. Early in my career, I made a habit of introducing people in my network who could benefit from knowing each other. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just connected people who had complementary needs or capabilities. Over time, this created a reputation as someone who added value to relationships. When I eventually needed help, whether that was finding new opportunities, getting advice, or building partnerships for my own projects, people were eager to help because they had experienced how I helped others. This approach works because it's based on genuine value creation rather than just transactional exchanges. People remember how you made them feel, and they're more likely to support those who have supported them. Alliance building also requires understanding the broader ecosystem you operate within. Who are the key influencers and decision makers? What are the informal power structures? Who are the connectors who can introduce you to important people? In business, this might mean understanding your entire value chain, suppliers, customers, partners, and even competitors. Sometimes your biggest opportunities come from unexpected alliances. For example, Apple and IBM were fierce competitors for decades. But in 2014, they announced a partnership to create business applications for iPhones and iPads. Instead of fighting each other for the same customers, they found a way to combine Apple's consumer technology with IBM's enterprise expertise. The partnership made sense because it leveraged each company's strengths while addressing their weaknesses. Apple got access to enterprise customers and business expertise. IBM got access to modern mobile technology and consumer design capabilities. Strategic alliances work best when they create value for all parties involved. This means understanding what your potential allies need and finding creative ways to structure win-win relationships. Sometimes this involves formal partnerships, but often it's just about building mutually beneficial relationships over time. The goal is to create a network of people who are genuinely invested in your success because your success benefits them as well. Here's how you can start building better strategic alliances. First, map out the key people and organizations in your ecosystem. Who influences the decisions that affect you? Who has complementary capabilities? Who serves the same customers through different channels? Second, focus on adding value before asking for help. Look for ways to introduce people, share information, provide assistance, or create opportunities for others. Third, maintain relationships even when you don't immediately need them. The best alliances are built over time through consistent interaction and mutual support.